And after our keynote speaker, Right Honourable Paul Martin has given his address, we will have a Q&A period. So please keep all questions until that time. Thank you.
Well, good evening. Welcome to all Rotarians and guests to this 35th week of Kitchener Rotary's 100 years of service to the community and to the world. This is also a joint meeting with Grand River Rotary and Kitchener-Westmount Rotary. I'm especially excited to host tonight's outstanding program. We're honored to have so many Rotary and community dignitaries with us tonight. A very special welcome to the Right Honourable Paul Martin and Rotary International President-elect Jennifer Jones, who will both be more suitably introduced shortly. Secretary Bill, would you please lead us in an invocation and land acknowledgement?
I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the land traditionally used by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the Neutral people. I also acknowledge that the
there's so many different people on here.
I also acknowledge that the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. Our invocation today is from a Lakota Great Spirit prayer. O Great Spirit, whose voice I hear in the winds, and whose breath gives life to all the world, hear me. I need your strength and wisdom. Let me walk in beauty and make my eyes ever hold the red and purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things you have made and my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise so that I may understand the things you have taught my people. Let me learn the lessons you have hidden in every leaf and rock. Help me remain calm and strong in the face of all that comes towards me. Help me find compassion without empathy overwhelming me. I seek strength not to be greater than my brother, but to fight my greatest enemy, myself. Make me always ready to come to you with clean hands and straight eyes, so that when life fades as the fading sunset, my spirit may come to you without shame. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Bill. And Past President Louise, would you please do the O Canada for us?
I will now share my screen.
Canada,
Thank you, Past President Louise. I don't know how you do it. You find one of these beautiful renditions every week, and every week it seems like it's better than the last one. This is great. Thank you. Great way to start us off today. So let me ask all of you to join me in a toast. First toast to Canada.
Canada.
And join me in a second toast to Rotary International.
To Rotary International.
President or Secretary Bill, would you acknowledge our visiting Rotarians and guests, please?
Yes, I will do my best. We've had a few people just joining us recently, but I'd like to begin with recognizing our keynote speaker tonight, the Right Honourable Paul Martin, who will be more formally introduced later, as will Jennifer Jones, Rotary International President-elect. Very pleased to have her with us this evening. She will be introduced more formally later. In no particular order, just the way we have noticed them. We do have Kathy Dick with us and Leslie Barmanian, past Rotary District Governors. We have Rudy Habish, our current 7080 District Governor. John English, past Member of Parliament. Sandhya Mani, Rotary District 7080 President-elect. John Lomax, the chair of the District 7080 Circle Committee. Chris Snyder, the co-chair of the HIP organization, helping Indigenous people, persons. We have Judy Nairn and Steve Nipping with us. Judy is the president of the Kitchener Westmount Rotary Club, and Steve Nipping is the president of the Kitchener Grand River Club. We are, three clubs are sharing this tonight. I believe, Mike Morris is with us tonight, Member of Parliament for Kitchener Centre. And if I missed anybody, please let yourself be known.
Mahmoud Hussain, President of the Rotary Club of Guelph.
Thank you for joining us.
Jim Beingessner, Kitchener-Conestoga Club.
Thank you.
Linda Craig, President of Rotary Club Guelph South.
Christine Randall, past District Governor, District 5360.
Rick Eisted, past District Governor, District 5360.
Liz Sandals, member of Rotary Club of Guelph and past MPP for Guelph. Hi, Gary.
Norm Duick from Edmonton, Rotary Club of Edmonton South, past president.
Mike Gauthier.
Past District Governor Mike Gauthier, glad to see you with us.
Wife Karen.
And Penning, Rotary Club of Guelph.
I'm Cindy Palermo from Dryden, Ontario, Northwestern Ontario, hometown of John Curry.
Joe Clark, past president of Toronto Eglinton.
Janine Parker, a club member of Ottawa South.
Denise Smith, Cambridge Sunrise.
Mulvihill, past president, Kelowna Sunrise in British Columbia.
Clay Melnick from the Thornbury Clarksburg Club and also a member of HIP honoring Indigenous people.
Corvella Small from the High River Club in Alberta.
Brendan McDonald from Halifax Northwest.
Don Watkins, past District Governor.
Rotary Club of Guelph. Andrew Johnson, sorry.
Richard Hodgson, past president, Halifax Northwest, Nova Scotia.
Excellent. Thank you all for coming. I was going to say coming from such a distance, but in Zoom, distance is immaterial. And if there's anybody else we've met, if you'd like to just put a chat to me, Bill Proctor, I'll catch your name later. But now I'll turn it back over to you, President Adrian. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Bell. And I too am impressed. I think that that's the magic of Zoom. We do have the opportunity to have so many more guests from far away, and I'm truly impressed. So thank you all for being here tonight. It's my distinct privilege to introduce Rotary International President-elect Jennifer Jones. Jennifer is the founder and the president of Media Street Productions, a 25-year-old award-winning media company in Windsor, Ontario. She's a proud member of the Rotary Club of Windsor-Roseland. Her talents have strengthened Rotary reach and impact through many roles, including as trustee of the Rotary Foundation, RI Vice President, co-chair of the End Polio Now, Make History Today campaign, raising funds alongside Bill and Melinda Gates and their foundation. Working alongside political figures, celebrities, and global leaders, she uses her voice to raise awareness and hundreds of millions of dollars to eradicate disease, support peace, and provide clean water and sanitation in developing areas in the world. Her skill as an expert storyteller inspires hope and promise and motivates people to take action. She's received many honors and recognition, including Rotary's Service Above Self Award, the Citation for Meritorious Service, the YMCA Peace Medallion, the Queen's Jubilee, and the Wayne State University Peacemaker of the Year Award, a first for a Canadian. Jennifer is married to Rotarian Nick Kryakovich, a local family physician. They share a love for many activities, including travel, cycling, golf, and relaxing at their family cottage. And they share a thirst for adventure, which is included, if you believe it or not, cresting Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania in Africa. So fellow Rotarians and guests, please help me welcome Rotary International President-elect Jennifer Jones.
Well, thank you very much, President Adrian. And it is an absolute joy to be able to be here with you as you celebrate not only your 100th anniversary, but with an incredibly esteemed guest tonight, the Right Honourable Paul Martin. A joy to be able to share time alongside with you, as well as all of the other dignitaries and special guests who are on this call. And let me just say, all protocols observed. I am coming to you tonight from the other side of the border in Evanston, Illinois, and the new home for Nick and I for the next year and a half as I take on this role as president of our international organization, the fifth Canadian to take on the role. And I think about your 100th anniversary. When we formed 117 years ago, you would have been 7 years old. Or actually we were sorry, I'm doing the math wrong. We were 7 years old when your club was formed. So you've been with Rotary from the very beginning. And I know that in looking through your website and talking with members, the incredible work that you've been able to do in our community to change our world, to, as our vision statement says, to unite people who take action across our globe in our communities and to create lasting change also within ourselves. And I know that that's something that you have all taken to heart. We certainly know that over the past couple of years, it has been an incredibly challenging time for every man, woman, and child on our planet. But I'd like to say that when the world stepped down, Rotary stepped up. You all showed that we were people of action. We've been able to galvanize behind the different kinds of vaccine efforts that have been going on, to take leadership roles in our communities and making sure that every citizen is being taken care of, not only physically, but our mental wellness as well. And so my hat's off to all of you for everything that you're doing for our community and for our world. Our polio efforts in particular are something that have been highlighted in recent times because we are so close to crossing the finish line, but also because of the incredible nature that our polio infrastructure has served to help us with the COVID-19 outbreak across the globe. We know that we have created, along with our partners, public health infrastructure in more than 70 countries across the globe. And when our pandemic first hit, we know that we were able to take those polio workers and transit what they were doing to the front lines in COVID. We've had challenges. We know that we have one case year to date right now. Last year, we had 5 until 2 weeks ago, and we came to realize and recognize a case cropped up in Malawi that we've been able to trace. And when we say these words that it's a plane ride away, that's exactly what happened. It came from Pakistan, one of the 2 remaining endemic countries, Pakistan and Afghanistan, into Malawi, a place where we had already taken the African continent out of the equation. They were certified last August as wild polio virus free. Now, this has been transported there, and we know that there's going to be some more hiccups before we cross the finish line. but we've never been more close. And it is because of the incredible partnership that we have with so many around the globe, including the governments of many countries of our world. And in particular, the Canadian government has played an incredible legacy role, leadership role in ensuring that we've had the valuable funds to be able to make sure that every child is receiving these 2 life-saving drops. The donations of our Canadian government, the support of our Canadian government, in particular under the leadership of the Right Honourable Paul Martin, who received our Polio Champion Award a few years ago, has taken the Canadian government donations in total to just shy of $1 billion to date. And that has been an incredible partnership that has given us the ability to tackle this as full on as we have been able to. And so sincere extended thanks for the continued support of public officials that are on this call from all of the different parties of our government. This is one of the most nonpartisan issues I think we've been able to deal with over the past at least 5 or 6 successive governments. And so an incredible thank you to all of you for the support that you provide. Let me take one additional opportunity before passing it over and back to you, President Adrian. I do want to just take a personal reflection before you get to your guest speaker this evening to recognize that we come from the same home city of Windsor, Ontario, and certainly Paul Martin Sr., a figurehead in our city. And I want to tell you, Mr. Martin, a story that you will remember being there, but we wouldn't have known each other. And it's the time that you were speaking at the retirement party of Herb Gray, the former Deputy Prime Minister of our country and another Windsor native. And I must tell you, and I hope this isn't too cheeky to say in front of everyone, but my goodness, that night when you spoke, I fell in love with you. You absolutely had the most incredible oratory skill, and you took us all along on a powerful journey as we understood the contributions of our former Deputy Prime Minister. And then watching you become our Prime Minister, it was with great pride, not only because you were from our city, but someone who I admired and respected immensely. So to be able to share a few minutes of time with you this evening as you're sharing your time with all of us, I just want to say thank you for the incredible contributions you have made to our country, to our world, and in particular to our polio efforts. So with that, President Adrian, once again, congratulations on 100 years of incredible service. And I stay tuned and look forward to what the world has in store as you embark on the next 100 years. Thank you so much for including me tonight.
Oh,
okay. Thank you, Adrian. Jennifer, thank you very, very much for your inspiring words and in recognition of the 100th anniversary of Kitchener Rotary. One of the things that President Adrian has really made important to us is, not only are we recognizing the legacy, which you've made very clear about in your words, but also the promise going forward in the next 100 years that we're going to continue the good work of Rotary. And having you here this evening, I think really reinforces that message. And we also congratulate you on your nomination as President-elect of Rotary International in the coming year. And we very much look forward to celebrating your future successes. Thank you again for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Shaki, would you please introduce the Right Honourable Paul Martin?
Thank you very much, Adrian. President Adrian, ladies and gentlemen, Rotarians, district governors, honorable guests, and Rotary International President Jennifer Jones, good evening to all of you. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you my good friend, the Right Honourable Paul Martin, the 44th Prime Minister of Canada, who served from 2003 to 2006. As Prime Minister, Mr. Martin succeeded in establishing plans to improve healthcare, reduce wait time, and nationalize early learning and childcare programs. He also reached a historic consensus with the 2005 Kelowna Accord to eliminate funding gaps in health, education, housing, and clean water for Indigenous people. During his term as Minister of Finance from 1993 to 2002, Mr. Martin erased Canada's deficit and recorded 5 consecutive budget surpluses while paying down the national debt. He was a member of Parliament for the riding of La Salle Marche from 1988 to 2008. 1999, as co-founder of the G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors, he served as its inaugural chair and continued in that position for 3 years. In 2008, he and his family founded the Martin Family Initiative, a charitable organization focused on bridging gaps by weaving Indigenous knowledge together with the most current research and evidence-informed methods. The Martin Family Initiative is committed to improving education, health, and the overall well-being of Indigenous children and youth in Canada. Before entering politics, Mr. Martin had a long career in the private sector. He graduated from the University of Toronto St. Michael's College and from the University's Law School. He was called to the Ontario Bar in 1966. There's also a special connection between Mr. Martin and our region. As Minister of Finance, Mr. Martin worked with the late Member of Parliament, Andrew Talagdi, to help Communitech move forward and flourish. We all know where Communitech is today. I could go on and on for a long time talking about Mr. Martin's great contributions to Canada, most notably, which goes into the heart of this evening's talk, his incredible support and impact on the recognition, education, and well-being of the Indigenous peoples of Canada. It is with immense pleasure that I invite my good friend, the 44th Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Paul Martin. And tonight, the talk is also to commemorate the 100-year anniversary of the Rotary Club of Kitchener. Mr. Martin, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Shaki, my old friend. And thank all of the Kitchener, in fact, the Rotarians from everywhere. Thank for the invitation to speak about Indigenous education and the programs of the Martin Family Initiative, otherwise known as MFI. And I as well want to recognize the great contribution that Rotary has made for a wide range of Canadian needs. I cannot tell you how much I admire Rotary for its work. And I am delighted to see that the new head of Rotary International, Jennifer Jones, comes from Windsor, my hometown. And I can only say that she is so good and so wonderful. That's what happens when you come from Windsor. I also want to say that Jennifer raising the issue of polio. I don't have a lot of memories when I was very young, but one of the memories I do have is my dad, when he was the Minister of Health and Welfare, and because he had polio at a young man, and because I had had polio at the age of 8, working with Rotary in Windsor. I can actually remember those discussions. I was going to talk about it. I was so glad when Jennifer raised them. And I can also tell you just one time at a point when I was in government, I was in Africa. And I was in Africa essentially because I was pushing for the Africans to develop a common market. We were meeting with a lot of people. I think I was the Minister of Finance at the time. And at some point I was asked, I got a call, there was a Canadian who wanted to see me. So I saw him. He was down in Africa, and he was a Rotarian from Canada. I'm not quite sure if I remember what part of Canada he was from, but he was over there working with Africa because, as some of you may remember, that as we got very close in the case of polio to eliminating polio, one of the big problems that we had were there were a number of African countries who were not doing the vaccines. It's kind of a little familiar to those of us in the last couple of months. But all I can say is everything that Jennifer said about Rotary, I believe. And it was a great honor for me to be able to accept your invitation to speak to you about MFI's programs. And with that, I will proceed to talk to you about them. The first program I would talk to you about is our literacy program. If you can't read or write by grade 3, then your primary education obviously is going to suffer seriously, because they'll pass you into grade 4 and you can't read and write. They'll pass you into grade 5, you can't read and write. And it is here, therefore, that we in MFI co-developed a program to ensure early literacy, which we carried out in a pilot project at the Kettle and Stony Point Reserve, which is not very far from where we are now, or where you are now. It's a Chippewa community, not far from Kitchener. And I just like to tell you part of the story, which has got us to do a lot of our programs. The chief of Kettle and Stony Point was a man called Tom Brissett, who died quite not long ago, recently. And the issue that he had, and he was the one that called us in, was that if reading and writing by the end of grade 3 was crucial to your primary education, the average number of students in any class in Ontario was 70% of students graduating from grade 3 could read or write, as near as they had to. At that point, in the Kettle and Stony Point, 13% only could read and write. So we went in with a program that we had developed and worked with a number of communities on, and we sat down with that community and we worked with them for 4.5 years. And then at the end of 4.5 years, Tom Brissett, Chief Brissett, called a meeting of his own community, but also a number of the surrounding towns, communities that were there. And he then stood up to make an announcement. He stood up and he said, 5 years ago, 13% of our grade 3 students could read and write, but no more. Today, following this program that was brought to us, 81% can read and write. And he said, this is greater than the Ontario average. And I was stunned, but it was there. And then he said something that has stayed with me ever since. He said to us all, you wondered at the time that we began this program if we would be able to have our students reading and writing at a high average. Well, the fact is that we have done it. You didn't think we could, but give us the tools. Give us the tools, and we will be able to do anything that is required to educate our young. His statement of give us the tools has stuck with me ever since. And it really has in many ways become the motive that we have had for our programs, is how do we give them the tools? And what I'd like to do is to talk to you about, well, 3 of our programs that basically, from my point of view, solve this notion of what are the tools that are required in terms of education and in terms of the future of Indigenous Canada. Well, the first tool was our literacy program that I just mentioned to you. Our second program is our early years program. Early years program is based on the premise that the years from the age of 0 to 5 are the single most important years in your life. In summary, they are that when you learn to speak, you build in these early years, you learn to speak, you build resilience, you make strong social connections. All of these lay the groundwork for later success in your life. And it was because of this, working with a Cree Nation in Alberta, that we created the early years program, which essentially seeks out experienced mothers in the community to work with new mothers as they raise their children. Now, the program was a huge success. And I'm not sure that the men in the audience will fully understand what the women do, but it has been explained to me that fundamentally, if you're not an experienced mother, if you're doing it for the first time, surely you understand that you have to reach out to your mother or your grandmother or your aunts or someone. And not everybody has those people. And that what we have done is to go into some of the communities that we're in, and we basically have set up a program with the experienced mothers in those communities who then work to develop and to work with the new mothers. And the program has been a huge success. We're now in communities in Alberta, in the Yukon, Nunavut, Nova Scotia, Ontario, Quebec, and we continue to expand. And it is because of this lack of groundwork in these early years that led Cindy Blackstock, who was one of Canada's leading Indigenous advocates, to say that too many Indigenous adults spend their lives compensating for difficult childhoods. And what I'm just saying is that the message here is most straightforward. Indigenous parents are their children's first and most important teachers. All parents want the best for their children, but they can't always do it alone. And the fact is that Indigenous children and their families are stronger when they face the world together with their communities as allies. And that is our early years program. There's something else as well that I learned from the communities as we built up this program, is that they too need access to affordable and nutritious food. And it is something we are looking at. We've now starting a series of programs of greenhouses so that in fact they can get vegetables that are not battered and they can get them at a reasonable cost. And all of this to show a little bit, really, I think, like Jennifer said, if we work together, and Rotary, this is really, in my opinion, Rotary's model. I've talked with people like, as an example, like Chris Snyder, and if we work together with the Indigenous people of this land, the country we build will be untouchable. And that's really why I think the Rotary is so important. And it's why I was so delighted that you gave me this chance to come and talk to you. The last program that I would talk to you about is our Indigenous business course. The vast majority of Indigenous students attend high schools off reserve, probably because many of their own high schools on reserve have not been properly funded. The problem is that when most high schools teach business, they teach it as if Indigenous business doesn't exist. For this reason, 14 years ago, MFI created the Aboriginal Youth Entrepreneurship Program, AYEP. Over 6,000 students have completed the course since it began. We also co-created an elementary course for grades 6, 7, and 8, which we are now piloting at the request of a number of communities. And these will be done not in schools off reserve, as most of our business programs are, but will be done on reserve, hopefully setting these primary school students in grades 6, 7, and 8 with an understanding that there is something there for them to learn, something there for them to master. In summary, let me just tell you that we are now in some 50 schools across the country. These are high schools off reserve, and we're now in 3 or 4 primary schools, but we'll be in many more. But the truth of the matter is, instead of being in some 50 high schools, we should be in over 100 high schools. And that's really why I wanted to talk to Rotary, because I think we could work together. And then what I would really hope that we can. For both programs, that is to say the primary program and the high school program, what we have done is to complete a training program for teachers. We developed workbooks for students and textbooks for the teachers, as well as supplements in tourism, food sustainability, and manufacturing, which will soon be ready. These books have made the difference. And let me, if I could just show you, this is a grade 11 business course book for Indigenous students. This is a grade 12 business course. But if you go through this, what you see is it is totally designated, totally designed for the understanding of a young Indigenous man or woman. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to see these students. I often go to a class and I'll sit down with the students and I'll meet with them. And it's quite clear at the students who've basically taken half the course. Because what they then start to do is to attack everything I did as finance minister. And I say, my God, you do sound like Canadian business. So the essence of this is where the kinds of things that I think we should be working with together, Rotary and ourselves, HIP and ourselves. For both of these programs, what we have done is to complete a training program for teachers. We developed workbooks for students and textbooks for the teachers. And as well as we developed supplements in tourism, food sustainability, and a manufacturing supplement, which will soon be ready. And I've showed you the books. I'll just tell you the incident that led to these books. One of the things that we decided to do when we first started was to do a pilot project. And we did it at a school north of Thunder Bay. And the students came and it was a high success. We did it on the basis of Ontario's program. At the end of the program, I met with the students and I said, what do you think? And they said, well, Mr. Martin, this is a great course. We really enjoyed it. But did it ever occur to you that all your examples took place in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, and we don't live in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver? And so many of your jobs were in large manufacturing, and we're not in large manufacturing. And it was at that point that we went out and hired a couple of teachers, and we got together with a number of Indigenous business people who then essentially enabled us to develop the books that you have seen. And we've now got a program which is taking off, which is doing very well. And we're in fact getting requests from other countries where there are Indigenous people as to see what fact they could pick up on the model. But all I really want to say to you is that here, Rotary's experience with HIP would be invaluable. I talked to Chris Snyder, who is so far ahead on this issue. And there are areas where we could be working together. Summer jobs, as an example, mentorship in the communities would be so helpful, because you're dealing with kids who know they want to be in business, who know they want to be entrepreneurs, but don't know anything about it and don't see it in their daily lives. And given that this is the youngest and the fastest growing segment in our population, you can imagine how important it is that this happen. And I'd like to really give you an example of why this is so important. Because there is one area where Rotary, which has done such good things, can make a difference, which I really would like to discuss within the context of HIP. I mentioned earlier that we should be in 100 schools. It is now more important that we do so because the world has changed. And the strength of the Canadian economy is, I believe, dependent on what we do now to take advantage of what is a positive revolution. I don't know how many of you have heard of the takeover of Clearwater Seafoods. Clearwater Seafoods is the largest seafood company in Canada. It operates out of Nova Scotia. And about a month ago, a group of Mi'kmaq nations bought control of Clearwater Seafoods. The president of the company, the owner of the company, decided that he wanted to sell. And because he understood the First Nations, he offered it to the First Nations. But understand this, this is a very large Canadian company. It's the largest seafood company in the country. And it's now being controlled by the people who work for it, who are the Mi'kmaq Nation in Nova Scotia. The same thing, another same revolutionary matter has occurred. In Apriat, which is in Quebec, the Innu Nations, which is one of the larger nations in Quebec, who used to fight all the time with Hydro-Quebec, because Hydro-Quebec was forever building dams on their water, flooding their lands and this kind of thing to create energy. But what happened is, with a new president in charge of Hydro-Quebec, the Innu Nations, seeing the opportunity for them to build a strong economic basis for themselves, made a deal to use some of their territory to build the largest wind farm in Quebec. And as a result, sell the energy to Hydro-Quebec, who would then sell it, export it to the United States. Fits in within, obviously, the environmental needs, but it also is this band that said we're going to be a major player in the creation of energy, which is going to be needed. We've got the land, we've got the people, and we're going to do it, and we're going to run it. Now, I can tell you that these two deals that I've just talked about have occurred because of the initiative, like the people like Chief Terry Paul of the Mi'kmaq, who has run for years a very powerful and successful community. But he was the one that was able to see the deal that could be done, and he went out and made it. And the case of the wind farm comes from another chief, Ghislain Picard in Quebec, who also had a bit of a business background and saw what could be done and approached Hydro-Quebec to do it. And now people are now saying that there's a revolution occurring in Indigenous Canada. They're going to enter into the economy. They're going to be major players. It's going to be very good for them, but it's also going to be very good for Canada. But the fact is, with the state of high school education, of business education in Canada, it's not going to happen. Because the fact is that Terry Paul, Chief Terry Paul, and Chief Ghislain Picard are not going to be there forever. They're going to have to be replaced. And where are the replacements going to come from if we're not educating them? Why do young people take business courses? They take business courses because they want to go into business. Why do we want them to take business courses? We want them to take business courses because we want Canada to be able to compete with the United States, with the Chinese, with whoever was out there. We understand the degree to which our economy is built on the skill set of young Canadians as they develop. Well, the youngest and the fastest growing segment of our population are Indigenous young people. And if they aren't given the same opportunities educationally to learn about business, we're not going to make the standard of what it takes to compete with the Americans, with the Japanese, with the Chinese. But if we follow what happened with Clearwater, if we follow what happened with the wind farms, and if we give these young people the chance to learn what business is all about, then in fact, we will meet that challenge and we will be a powerful country. Our business course is in 60 schools across the country. But the fact of the matter is that's 60 schools out of 120 schools in which they should be there. And my suggestion and my hope is that along with Rotary, we can begin to get that message out. Because if we get that message out, we will change the debate in Canada. You know, we all talk about reconciliation. Well, the real unfair reconciliation is economic. Is economic. There is something wrong when the poorest segment of our country is basically made up of the youngest people in our country. And that's where I would hope that along with Rotary, that we can make that difference. And I believe that we can. We can change the nature of the debate in this country. We can change the nature of the debate so that Indigenous Canadians are leading their sector of the economy. We can lead this country, because what it needs is a partnership that is real. And that is something that people like Chris Snyder, that HIP, that so many of the people who are here. That's why I was so glad to hear from Jennifer in her opening remarks. What if Rotary takes the bull by the horns, if Rotary says we're going to make this happen, we are going to free the next generation of Indigenous people, young people. We're going to free them from the lock that is on their future. Then I can tell you, this country will be a different country, a greater country, and a fairer country. And I have such confidence in Rotary that I know it will happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Martin. I'm going to take your spotlight off. And for those of you who see him only on your screen, you can change back to the gallery view so that we can see our Hollywood squares. And I am going to ask a couple of questions of you that have come in the chat. And if anybody wants to ask a question, they can put it in the chat, or you could use the reaction button and raise your hand so I can see that you do have a question, because it'll spotlight you and highlight you. So the first question that I have for you, Mr. Martin, is from Jim Beingessner. And he asked, do all of the reserves in Canada have the capacity to have a viable economy, considering location, infrastructure, and resources?
Question is, do they?
Mm-hmm. Yes, the question is, do all of the reserves in Canada have the capacity to have a viable economy, considering location, infrastructure, and resources?
No, they don't. I mean, I think we all understand that, as an example, that if you ask, do all of the smaller towns up in northern Ontario or in the northern part of any province, do they have the same opportunity that people down south has? The answer is no. But there are those opportunities if in fact they are identified, such as tourism, such as mining, if that's what's going on. But you need the people who are going to develop the mines. And what we really got to have is an opportunity, such as happened with with Clearwater, that when there are natural resources to be delivered, to be discovered, or natural resources, in fact, to be profited from, that the Indigenous people shouldn't necessarily only have to be the laborers who are doing it. There's no reason why they can't be the entrepreneurs. There's no reason why they can't be the executives who are making it happen. But they've got to be given the training, the ability to allow them to do it. And so far, we have not done it. So you ask a very important question, and that is it possible in all of these reserves? And the answer is no, any more than it's possible in every small town in this country to do well. But just as we recognize that education is in fact the path to success for the kinds of things that you're talking about, surely to God, we should understand that economic education for Indigenous young people is crucial, and we will all benefit from it.
Thank you. One more question from the chat, and then I'm going to start. There's a few hands that have been raised. So this is from Christine Rendell from District 5360. Paul, could you please share any knowledge about the $1.3 billion settlement for the Siksika Nation in Alberta. Are you aware of it?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to ask Cindy
But
Palermo.
if that's going to take the question away, if I could speak to that young person, am I aware of the issue? Yes, but I'm not sufficiently aware, I think, to basically examine every part of it. But I would very much like to answer the question. It may be off camera, that's fine. But if the person who asked you the question, if they would be prepared to give you their phone number, I'll contact them.
That's great. Christine, if you hear that, please, and I will put that in the chat as well, if you can contact me and I will get you connected. Okay, over to Cindy. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
I think I have. I just
You
wanted
are?
to say, yes, I'm very proud to be one of the high school teachers from Dryden, Ontario, who has been trained in AYAP. And our high school, Dryden High School, is running the AYAP program with our business teachers. And it's an amazing comprehensive program that you could just literally hand off to a teacher and they would be able to deliver it. Importance is making connections with Indigenous businesses and community members. Our high school has a large Indigenous student population. We have 2 reserves on either side of Dryden, Ontario, and we have a number of students who fly in from as far as Fort Severn to attend high school in our community. And so we do have a lot of students. We also have partnerships within our community to help support those students. So it is wonderful to have this particular program, but there's all sorts of other community supports that work with it. And all of those things together have really been, I guess, working hand in hand to give all these students that boost to get to that level of success that we were so happy to see. We've got a First Nations, Métis, Inuit graduation coach. It's been a program we've had at our school for a number of years now, and other schools have been following our model. So that with AYAP, we're getting some great results. And Mr. Martin, it's a fabulous program and I'm really excited to be part of it. So thank you for all your hard work and making it easy for a teacher like myself to be able to deliver that programming.
Could I just say that to those who are listening, you've just heard just a bit of what I hear, and it is to talk to a teacher. But like when we just talked to a teacher, we just heard a teacher, and they talk about what they can accomplish in class, and they talk about how happy they are to be doing it. I'm going to tell you, it just gives you such confidence in the future of the country. And I can tell you, so I want to thank you for what you have just said. And what I would really hope is that one of the things we can do as we push to grow this is get the teachers to be speaking out, because the teachers know the facts far better than any of us. And if they met the teachers and then they met the students, my God, it won't take long.
Thank you. Another question from Ann McKay from the chat. May I ask how the First Nations communities are interested or are welcoming these initiatives?
I think you've just gotten a bit of an example of that. They are very interested. They are very interested. The fact is, however, that as you know, education on reserve is paid for by the federal government. Education off reserve is paid for by the provinces. The high schools on reserve are very small, and they have a lot of trouble competing with the high schools off reserve by the provinces. So the real challenge that we have now is to get the provinces to support the program, to support that there is a program. If you're an Indigenous person, and you've lived in a smaller community, or if you're an Indigenous person and your father or your mother hasn't gone to the office every morning, you've got a very different perspective, and you do, and which is why the course that we have in these books is so important. The answer really is the interest is there, but in order to have the interest come to the fore, you've got to go in, you've got to explain, and you've got to make it possible that the education will follow. And if you do that, then you will succeed, because one of the things that's very interesting, just to give you one example, the reason that the high school course, which is going, was followed up as well by a primary school course, came from a number of chiefs across the country who said, listen, we think if we get to the students younger, they will understand it. So let's have could you develop for us an elementary school program, which we've done. And we did that because chiefs from communities wanted to get the product to their students before they got to high school.
John Lomax, you have your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Martin, I'm actually on the HIP board, and I'm very inspired by your speech. You know, it gives me hope from a big picture point of view that we're going to create the kind of Canada I think that that we all believe in. Part of our reality in District 708, I would say, as far as Indigenous reserves are concerned, we're sort of landlocked. We don't have, there's not a lot of direct access. So our strategy in 708 has been to create relationships and partnerships locally, because there's a very significant portion of the Indigenous population that live in urban settings. So is there any way that we can take advantage of some of these learning tools that you're providing to go locally to Indigenous communities in our own communities, for instance, Kitchener and Brampton and so on?
Absolutely. What we have is, I mean, this program, the business program is run. Obviously, it's run by our foundation, but the fact is that the head of it is Dr. Carolina Linda is an experienced educator. The people who are in there who go in and train the teachers who have not taught business how to teach business, and we will do that anywhere we can get where a province will support the program, because the one thing I'm sure you will understand is that these kids, when a kid takes a course, a student takes a course in high school, they're looking for high school credits. And so they may be very interested in business. They may understand the long term, but if they don't get a high school credit, then they won't graduate from high school. And if they can't graduate from high school, they won't be able to go to university or to college, or they won't be able to go into another avenue. So the answer to your question is there a way in which we can get together? Absolutely. All you have to do is call, and Carolina Lindman's people will come and see you. But in the end, we will deliver the program. We will train the teacher, but we've got to get the local school board to essentially make sure that the provincial schools are prepared to teach it and at the standard that is required. And if it's on the reserve, then it's a question of providing probably a bigger high school than exists there, or the specialized course. And as long as we get the federal government on side, it'll happen. It comes back to the need for credits, and it comes back to money.
Thank you. I have a question from the chat from Domingo Bernal. What is the target and what time frame is the plan to influence the Indigenous generation?
Well, to be truthful, the question that I would give you today is a more optimistic question than the one I would have given you a year ago, before Clearwater and before Apiat. Clearwater has really changed the debate. Think about this, that a group of First Nations in Nova Scotia took control, borrowed the money, bought the shares, and took control of the largest seafood company in Canada. Now that's what is the revolution. So my answer today is what you really have to do is to demonstrate that Clearwater can be repeated and repeated and repeated again. And it can be. There's no reason why communities with the institutional backing can't take over. And there's no reason why when they take over with the management team, that management team cannot direct the young people who take business courses and who basically, whether they do at the end of high school or whether they go off to university and get MBAs, to do it. So it's a function, it's not a function of having the First Nations, the Métis or the Inuit want to do it. They want to do it, believe me. What is necessary is demonstrating to them that it is possible to essentially get there. And I'm telling you, we can.
So wonderful to hear. Dana Nelson, you're up. You have a question? Go ahead.
Yes. Hello. Thank you so much, Mr. Martin, for that presentation. I did a project last semester about Indigenous unemployment in Toronto, and it was sort of difficult to find accurate statistics, but the numbers that we came across was basically that there's 63% unemployment rate in Toronto and 90% poverty rate of Indigenous populations in Toronto, which are very sad numbers. And I admire this program. I think it's a fantastic program that's been done. But I wonder about the employment piece after that. So, you know, there's the education, which is important, but what we found is that there's still inflexible hiring practices and environments that are somewhat unwelcoming to Indigenous peoples. And I wonder if there's any plan to expand in that aspect or to take a more holistic view of education to include employment as well.
Look, that there are the problems that you described. They exist. I believe we can beat it. I believe we can beat it by refusing to accepting them. One of the reasons that I really think that Rotary can play a role here is that when you take a look at what Rotary did when it took on polio, Rotary really demonstrated that nothing was going to stop it. Now, Chris Snyder has created HIP, and HIP is a Rotary body that is doing tremendous work. If we were doing a partnership, if HIP were to be part of that, bringing in Rotary, or if Rotary were to come in on its own, then it's what you're going to be seeing is you're going to be getting pressure from major Canadian bodies, which is what Rotary really is. So I know what you're saying, but we're in 50 or 60 schools, we're 60 schools across the country. You think about that. We did run into some of what you talked about, but it's pretty hard to beat. I mean, it's pretty hard not to beat it. And primarily because you get those young people on side. And I can tell you that what Clearwater has done is it's changed the argument. It's changed the argument. You know, I think that we all, and I don't want to belabor this, but I think we all saw that public opinion was very much affected by the whole question of the residential schools in the last year. That public opinion shift will be to our benefit in terms of doing what we want to do here. But I can tell you that the thing that also will continue is when the enthusiasm of these young people, when they realize that, in fact, they can rise in Canadian business. When they start to meet the entrepreneurs, I mean, I can tell you, I could give you a list of Indigenous entrepreneurs in this country who are among the finest entrepreneurs and the smartest people I know. And they're out there. There just aren't enough of them, and they don't get enough publicity. But I can tell you that they're there, and I believe that what we can do is we can organize the kind of approach that will satisfy what you need. I understand your question. Your question is an important question, but I believe we're good to beat it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mac Graham, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Louise. Mr. Martin, thank you so much for speaking to our club tonight. I really appreciate it. This has been wonderful. I'm just thinking back, Mr. Martin, when I think of your time in office and I think of you as part of the Canadian government, I associate you with budget surpluses and being a world leader. I think of your time as with the G7, and that's really where my mind goes as someone who's a real global player. And so I'm just really curious what inspired you and the Martin Family Initiative to focus your energies on enhancing the lives of the Indigenous community. Where did the inspiration come from? I'm just curious to find out.
Well, I think part of the inspiration came from the fact that when I was about 17 or 18, I got a job on the Mackenzie River as a deckhand, and they were all young men. The young men I worked with were Indigenous, and we would, when we were going by tug up and down the Mackenzie, before we had to work, the young men, we'd get together and we would talk. And I know that a lot of young women don't think young men talk very intelligent things when they're getting together, but you're smiling and you're absolutely right. But we would exchange views, and I learned an enormous amount. Now, and when I was the Minister of Finance, you're right, I made very severe cuts in spending because we were in real trouble. And the argument that I raised, and it was an absolutely true argument, is that our social programs were going to be in trouble if we didn't deal with the deficit that we were facing at that time. And what happened was that Mexico got into a little trouble. Their interest rates started to go up and ours started to go up, and I had to act if we were going to preserve our social programs. But the one thing that we did not cut was the transfers to Indigenous Canada. We did not cut it at that time. What we did do is cut the amount of increases that they expected, but we did not cut the absolute amount. But now to go to your question, when I was Prime Minister, exactly because of your question, I really said, wait a minute, you've been here, Minister of Finance, you've done all kinds of things. The issue that drives you is the issue of Indigenous Canada, and the time has come to do something. And that's at the time that we brought in the Kelowna Accord. The Kelowna Accord was an agreement between the federal government and the provinces and the First Nations, the Métis Nations, and the Inuit. And what it was we set out what had to be done. We didn't say we could do it all in one day, but we set out what had to be done in an agreement with the First Nations, the Métis, and the Inuit. And that would have over then we put in $5 billion, bang, on the table right away. Ralph Goodale was the Minister of Finance, and he put $5 billion on the table. And we said, we will pay for the education, for the hospital care, for the clean water and the housing that is required. And the Kelowna Accord went ahead, the provinces all agreed and we agreed. But then I did something that I would like to have not done, but I lost the next election. And when that happened, the Kelowna Accord unfortunately was scrapped. And it all pretty well, all of its measures, we were going to do them all within about a 4-year period. Many of its measures have been introduced by subsequent governments, but unfortunately the huge break when nothing was done for about 4 or 5 years after that, we just didn't do it. But I did bring in the Kelowna Accord that would have done it. And I must say that a lot of it has now been brought into being.
Thank you. Badar, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. It's a privilege to be talking to you amongst fellow Rotarians. My name is Badar Shamim. I'm a Rotarian with the Rotary Club of Brampton, same club as John Lomax. By profession, I am a portfolio manager. And as I sit here and listen to you talk, it resonates well with me for 2 very simple reasons. I'm a first-generation immigrant from Pakistan, came to Canada at the age of 17. And for those of you who are not familiar with Pakistan, Pakistan is still, for the most part, an agrarian society. So despite the fact that I studied business and finance and have worked in financial sector for the last 21 years, it takes a little bit of time, even for a first-generation immigrant like myself, to culturally climatize to a significantly institutionalized society like Canada, and a society that has such a depth and breadth and history of corporate environment. So not only will the education piece will have to be introduced and reinforced, but at the same time, culturally too, all of us are going to have to work on making sure that Indigenous communities, as they integrate into the corporate sector and look at doing bigger and better things for themselves, we're also making space for that and accommodating that. Secondly, sir, I am currently serving as the polio chair for our district, and it gives me extreme pleasure to tell you that Pakistan has just celebrated first anniversary of having no new polio cases. We're working closely with the Rotarians on the ground, and given your personal experiences with polio, would love to see you joining a friendship team from our Rotary district, perhaps under President-elect Jennifer Jones' banner, to visit Pakistan in due course.
Well, I would. Your last suggestion would be of considerable interest to me because you're right about polio, and I must say working with Jennifer Jones is not something that I would object to at all. So I think that we could do that. I've got to say to you, I am very optimistic. I've now talked to young Indigenous people across the country, and they want this. They want it. I mean, their basic position is, look, we fundamentally, when there's activity and there's business activity that is available, we don't want to be bought off. We want to do it. We want to do it. And in fact, the percentage of entrepreneurs among Indigenous people is higher than the percentage of entrepreneurship among the Canadian population. So it fits very much their underlying philosophy. So, and that's one of the reasons that I'm really confident. I know that people are worried about it, but I can tell you that if you spend much time with young Indigenous people, really whether they be Inuit, Métis, or First Nations, you will find people who really want to make it happen. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we have Cindy again. Go ahead, Cindy.
I just wanted to add, you were speaking about AYAP, and then Dana was discussing low employment rates for Indigenous youth. So AYAP being a phenomenal program, it takes a village. It can't do it all the work on its own. In our school, and I'm not tooting our own horn, but we have a very busy cooperative education program, which becomes part of our specialist high skills major business program. So when students put those two things together, they have opportunities to get hired through their co-op placements. So we've got Indigenous students who are working with entrepreneurs, small business people who have got their own business in our community. And the students are gaining skills as well as seeing what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And they get opportunities a lot of times to continue to be employed after the co-op placement is done. And so I don't know, Dana, if there are programs that are as busy as ours, like ours is a small community, but kind of bypassing going directly to businesses and getting students hired through cooperative education programs kind of helps bypass some of the prejudice that they might see when they're going through the process of being interviewed. Specialist high skills majors programs and the cooperative education programs also prepare kids with interview skills. They give them good resumes, even if they don't really have anything to put on them. It really is working all of these pieces together to get to that place where you really need them to be versus just saying, hey, go get a job. So yes, it's all these things kind of complement each other, and we're doing quite well in our small community because we've got a really strong and supportive community and really hardworking cooperative education teachers that go out there and ask businesses, will you take our kids of all nations, basically.
So if I could just pick up on that and point out, there are people who will ask, is this feasible? Can you get these young Indigenous people to want to do this kind of thing? Is it possible to get the teachers to go in there and everything else? One of the reasons that, and I think that where Rotary could be a great help, is what they really have to do is to talk to the people who are doing it. As I listen to you, and I bet you everybody else who's listened to you in the last, in this intervention and the previous intervention, what you're essentially saying is it's doable. We can do it. And that's what people have got to hear. That what they've got to hear, what you've just said, that these young people want it. And what they heard is that the teacher's saying, yes, we can teach it and we want to do it. So people like you are the reason that I am so confident, because I've seen it. We've been doing this now for almost a decade. And I have seen it. I've seen the success of these books. I've seen the success of the teachers. I've seen the success of the young people who've been hired in jobs. I get it quite a lot. I think that I really believe that Canadian business is prepared to do it. What they really require is a lot of Canadians saying this can be done. What they really then need are people who know what they're talking about, like you speaking it out.
Well, we are people of action here at Rotary, so I'm sure that we have over 100 people on the call, so we're going to have a lot of action happening from this. So thank you for all your comments. We've got a couple more questions and then we're going to close off. Mahmoud, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Martin. I don't need to remind you how difficult it is to govern Canada, but you mentioned the examples that originally the examples were Toronto, Vancouver, Quebec centric, and it changed to focus on Indigenous areas. Indigenous areas in Canada is varied, and they're not the same. There's some similarities, but they're not the same. So is the program asymmetrical as it goes from a province to a province or from a region to a region?
Well, it depends. No, it doesn't vary from province to province. Yes, it varies. Yes, it does. It does vary from province to province. That's something that one can expect. But I can tell you, I have never been in a province where it wasn't possible to do what we're trying to do here. It's what is required. What is required is the ability to succeed. The young people, the young Indigenous people who are out there are prepared to speak to that. And if anybody gets together with a group of them and start talking about it, they are very quick. They're very quick to say, this is what I want to do. So when people hear that the young people want to do it, that's important. When they hear a teacher speak, as we just heard 5 minutes ago, that has a huge influence. because the teacher knows this up front. So yes, are there differences? Are there differences across the country? Yes, there are. But on the other hand, that's one of the reasons that we have a federal government, and it's also the reason that we have provincial governments, is to basically be able to speak for what should be done.
One final question I just thought of it. Is this bilingual, by the way?
Yes, it is. It's bilingual. It's bilingual in both ways. It is bilingual in French and English. Our programs are very active in Quebec, as they are very active in Ontario. So yes, it is bilingual from that point of view. And then the question is also, is it bilingual in any of the First Nations languages or any of the Inuit languages? And it is. Our textbooks are available in French and in English, okay? And we have talked to certain, in some communities who would like to see it put in their language. And where, if we can produce enough students who want to do it, that will see it, then the answer is we'll do it in their language, in that language.
Thank you.
Ms. Snyder, go ahead, our co-chair of HIP, Honoring Indigenous People.
Thank you. I thought after my name being mentioned as often as it was from Paul, I thought I had a cheering society here. But anyway, I thought it might be useful just to say a few things. I'm not sure if everybody knows what HIP is. It stands for Honoring Indigenous Peoples. It's a partnership between Rotary and Indigenous peoples. It's a cross-to-cross organization. Our board is made up of 20 people, half of whom are Rotary, half of whom are Indigenous, and 50% of the people on our board are women. Our focus is education, awareness, and building of relationships. And from our vantage point, what Mr. Martin has been talking about just dovetail right into what we're doing. And we've been chatting about this for some time, and hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll have sort of a formal collaboration worked out, because we think it is a natural to work together. Our vision is for every Rotary Club in Canada to connect with an Indigenous community somewhere in Canada. Now, it could be out your back door, or it could be far enough away. And the rationale behind that is Rotary is a community organization, and working with other communities, we just think it makes a whole lot of sense. And I'd say right now we've got 300 or 400 clubs that are working one way or another on this. So I'll leave it at that, other than to say we're very excited. We think there's a lot of terrific opportunities here for Indigenous people, for the Martin Initiative, and for HIP and Rotary. Meg,
Let me just simply say that I am really very confident in what we have done, what we have accomplished. And I am very glad to hear Chris say what he has just said, because when I first started in this 10-15 years ago, were conversations with Chris that gave me the confidence that we could go ahead. So I'm delighted to hear him, and I am a big fan.
Thank you. And one last question from Ali, and then I am going to ask Karen Redmond to please thank Mr. Martin. Go ahead, Ali. You're on mute.
Hi, everyone, and what an honor it is to be speaking with Mr. Paul Martin. This is just such a delight for me. My name is Ali Farhat, Mr. Martin, and I'm the chairman of the FNMI Workshops Charity, which is a program that delivers, or that we have committed to complying with the youth program's call to action number 66, and deliver programs on reconciliation through our live shows and establish a national network to share information and best practices. by supporting and empowering Indigenous people to independently deliver services and address the social, cultural, and economic conditions in their communities by ensuring Jordan's principle. So what we have been doing over the last 20 years is really delivering life skills workshops to Indigenous communities across Canada. And I did a little study of national retained knowledge test results, and it was undeniable that students that were fed information visually were retaining that information, for more information and for longer periods of time over many years. So we decided to reconstruct our workshops into a live theatrical performance of a young Indigenous youth, or reenactment of a young Indigenous youth's life who fell victim to bullying, abuse, abandonment, addiction, depression, and ultimately death. We use some of the biggest stars that you know from television and film. And we've also partnered up with CDI College to do a workshop, a seminar on continuing education. We also have a film and television set etiquette course that we deliver, a pro wrestling seminar, which is where our origins started from, music and artistic display seminar, and we deliver these programs to Indigenous communities. So what we've tried to do is bring the most exciting and entertaining aspects of our society, be it music or film and television and pro wrestling, and deliver these programs to these communities so that these youth can see that they have an opportunity, and where it's full circle, where we give them the live presentation, and then we register them or sign them up for the seminars, and then we provide employment for them. So it's full circle. And we're doing something that I think a lot of these organizations are not, as we are going from community to community to over 3,100 communities across Canada, or 619 band governments. But also the thing that separates us, I think, from the pact is that how can I put this? We do everything from conflict resolution, anti-racism, drug and alcohol addiction, family values and respect, suicide prevention, truth and reconciliation, opioid awareness, and the other programs, along with a 5,000 square foot bouncy house that we deliver to the community for the youth to enjoy, with archery range and axe throwing lessons that they can actually hone their skills. And the program that we've developed and designed in conjunction with the Eagle Tail House Society, which is a healing house for Indigenous women who have completed addictions recovery and are unable to return home due to a court order or a negative environment, which they may find themselves back in addiction. And you know, when I started to look at some of the things that were happening within the Indigenous communities, whether it be 50% of all positive HIV tests in Canada are Indigenous, or that 50% of 50%, well, actually, let me say this: by the year 2050, according to the rate of increase from 2017 to 2020, all youth in male and female in juvenile corrections, all female in federal penitentiaries, and 70% of males by the year 2050 will be Indigenous. So these overwhelming statistics that we looked at, and we started to say, how can we correct this? And it's one thing for the government to say we're providing services or we're funding them, but it's reaching these Indigenous communities that is the hard part, is reaching these youth in a way that entertains them and is not just coming and lecturing them. So what I would like to do is, maybe if it wasn't too much trouble, is to discuss our program with you in a private setting, just because we are just launching this year, and see how we can partner with your organization and the Rotary organization, and possibly maybe work with you as opposed to with CDI College, if that was something that was more beneficial to the Indigenous people. But I think I would really enjoy a moment of your time to kind of explain to you what we're doing and how we're going about it. We've talked to Chief Robert Joseph, former residential school survivor, Chief and Dr. Robert Joseph, who is we've met with the Justice Department. We had one of the RCMP officers stand up after my presentation and said, "I'm quitting the RCMP and I'm coming to work with the FNMI Workshops charity." And Chief Robert Joseph says to me, he said, "Please tell the Justice Department that Chief Robert Joseph supports the FNMI and all of BC is behind you." So the support and for this type of program, bringing in WWE wrestlers and celebrities, Indigenous artists like Jaylee Wolf and some of these people that we brought on board, I think it might benefit us to gain from your wisdom and maybe have a moment to chat about our program and how, because we are the boots on the ground. We are the people that are going from community to community to deliver these programs in the most entertaining way possible, to inspire these youth to say, I want to continue. I want to go on to post-secondary. I want to be an actor. I want to be an athlete. I want to be a musician. I want to be an artist. And I think I'm so grateful that I took the time to sit in on this. And I think maybe that there's some things that we could do together in partnership.
Could I just then respond? First of all, I would be more than happy to meet. So if we can set that up, let's do it, and let's take it one step further. Look, I would just make one slight comment to something that you said, and as you know from my time as Minister of Finance, I spent a lot more money as Prime Minister, but as Minister of Finance, I did fight the deficit, and I was not a big spender. But there is one thing that I learned, but that I had known from a long time, and I think it's something we've all got to look at. When people look at cost, somebody wants to do something, or something is going to happen, and people look at the cost of it. The question that you have to ask is not simply, what does it cost today? You have to ask the question, what does it cost if you don't do it 10 years from now? And I think that in the debate on cost, that is in fact the debate that's got to take place, because if what you do in any way, shape, or form is prevents young people from achieving their ambitions, young people from leading decent lives, you're costing the country a fortune. I mean, that's why education is so important. That's why supporting young people is so important. And that's really what we're talking about here in the programs that I've talked about, or the future of Indigenous Canada.
So I'm going to intervene now and tell you that I think Jennifer Jones, our president, sort of reflected something a lot of us do, Paul. And I want to thank personally Sheila for continuing to share you with the rest of the country and continuing to inspire us. You know, when I heard the roll call at the very beginning, there were people here from Halifax all the way to Alberta. And I know the comment was made that that's easy to do on Zoom, but that's easy to do when you've got the Paul Martin magnetism as an attractor. It would have been easy for you to rest on your laurels. You have a dynasty out of Windsor, which we all know is the epicenter of the universe. We had Paul Martin Sr., we had Paul Martin Jr., you in your own right. I mean, there's the Kelowna Accord, you wrestled down the deficit, you did amazing things, and there was a lot of cutting edge legislation that people forget happened under your watch, one of them being same-sex marriage. And I have to tell you that that legacy of change is always based on what I have known in you, which is true pragmatism. And I love when you said, thinking back to that very first encounter with the chief, saying, give us the tools. And then you looked at literacy, early years, and Indigenous business courses. And those are all things that we can measure and we can see outcomes. You've also provided us with a real call to action. And you've also demonstrated, and I think somebody mentioned this, I think maybe it was Mac in his comments, that you're able to listen. You've always done that as a finance minister, as a representative of Windsor, as a finance minister, that you're able to listen. And you listened when kids were telling you that they didn't think they would ever have jobs in Toronto, Vancouver, or Montreal, and they weren't going to be in big business. And I think that's one of the reasons why this program has been so successful and led to things like Clearwater and the wind farms. I think you're absolutely right that what you're talking about can change the course of Canada. And I love the idea of economic reconciliation. I haven't heard that term before, and I'm going to start using it because I think it's stunning. On behalf of the Rotary clubs, to say thank you to you for giving us of your time and providing us with this inspiration. There has been a donation made to Rotary Foundation to vaccinate 100 children against polio. So again, on behalf of all of us here, Paul, thank you for what you have done, what you continue to do, and the inspiration you continue to provide us as a nation.
Karen, I'm touched by what you're saying, but the truth of the matter is the person who should be saying thank you is me. This has been a tremendous discussion as far as I'm concerned, and it's really based on so much of what Rotary has done. So, I mean, you're going to get outstanding people from Windsor like Jennifer and me, but Adrian, I just want to say, and Karen, to you, thank you so much for what you had to say. I think what's going to come out of this is we're going to do a lot. So thanks a lot. We may have started something here. Okay.
Well, thank you, Karen. Great words. And thank you, Paul Martin, and certainly Jennifer for being with us tonight. I think the words that kind of sum us up tonight are inspirational and motivational, but mostly I think they were educational. And I think that's really important, is that we learned something tonight, and we learned maybe a path forward. And I know a lot of our clubs struggle with our plans, or how do we address this relationship issue. And we've certainly got a lot of words that will help us to direct that in the future. So thank you so much to both of you for being here. It's been a real honor. And for myself, and I'm sure for all the other guests and Rotarians, a big thanks to both of you. Thank you. So
thank you.
I think we're done for the evening, and I don't have a lot of announcements for our own club members for next week, except for I know that Paul Roster wants me to say something about buy tickets for Catch the Ace. Make sure you go back and get on before Wednesday of next week and buy your tickets. So if there's nothing else for the good of Rotary, I'm going to ring the bell, and I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you so much to all of you.
Take care.